He pushed her away, convinced control mattered more than feelings. 2 years later, fate reunited them, and beside her stood a little girl with his eyes, ready to change his life forever. Daniel Hartley had spent most of his adult life mastering control. As the chief executive officer of a fast-rising technology corporation, he operated in a world where decisions were made quickly and consequences were measured in numbers. His appearance matched the image people expected of him: blonde hair always neatly kept, blue eyes sharp and calculating, and his reputation reflected the same precision. He was disciplined, driven, and quietly distant, the sort of man who believed emotions complicated efficiency and attachment threatened focus. Success came early, and with it came the habit of guarding himself from anything unpredictable. He did not expect Mia Brooks to disrupt that carefully ordered structure. They met during a business networking event that he had attended more out of obligation than interest, and her presence stood out not because she tried to impress anyone, but because she didn't. Her brown hair fell naturally around her shoulders, her warm brown eyes attentive rather than strategic, and her conversation lacked the rehearsed ambition he encountered everywhere else. She spoke with sincerity, asking questions not to gain advantage but to understand, and Daniel found himself lingering longer than he intended. What began as curiosity turned into routine meetings, and routine gradually turned into something that felt dangerously personal. With Mia, he discovered a version of himself he had long neglected. He laughed without calculation, shared stories he rarely revisited, and allowed his evenings to exist outside schedules and obligations. She brought calm to a life defined by competition, and for a time he convinced himself that balance was possible. Yet beneath that comfort lingered an unease he never fully confronted. Emotional reliance contradicted the independence he valued, and while he enjoyed her presence, part of him feared what it meant to need someone in ways he could not control or quantify. As their relationship deepened, circumstances around Mia shifted in ways Daniel had neither anticipated nor prepared for. Pressures mounted in her personal life, demanding attention, patience, and emotional investment that did not fit easily into his structured world. Where she sought reassurance and partnership, he felt expectations closing in around him, challenging the boundaries he had built. Instead of adapting, he retreated inward, interpreting vulnerability as instability and responsibility as distraction. The warmth he once embraced began to feel like uncertainty, and uncertainty, to him, was unacceptable. The end came without drama, shaped more by restraint than conflict. One evening, in a conversation carried out with controlled composure, Daniel told Mia that their paths were no longer aligned. He spoke of priorities, of focus, of the necessity of maintaining direction, framing the decision as rational rather than emotional. His tone remained measured, his posture composed, yet beneath that surface was avoidance he refused to acknowledge. Mia listened in silence, her expression revealing hurt she chose not to translate into argument. When he left, the quiet behind him felt heavier than any confrontation might have been. In the weeks that followed, Daniel immersed himself in work with renewed intensity, convinced that distancing himself had been the responsible choice. He filled his schedule, expanded his ambitions, and reinforced the narrative that personal attachment threatened progress. Still, traces of memory surfaced unexpectedly, laughter echoing in empty rooms, familiar gestures recalled without warning, and he dismissed them with disciplined indifference. He believed he had preserved control over his life, unaware that consequences often unfold beyond immediate perception. What Daniel did not know was that his departure marked the beginning of a reality he could neither anticipate nor measure. While he continued forward under the assumption that the chapter had closed, the impact of his decision extended far beyond what he allowed himself to imagine. The life he left behind had not paused, it had transformed, quietly shaping a future that would one day return to confront him in ways no strategic preparation could prevent. The weeks after Daniel's departure passed in a blur that Mia struggled to fully comprehend. The apartment felt larger in his absence, the quiet stretching across rooms that had once been filled with conversation and shared routine. She continued working, maintaining structure wherever she could, yet a sense of disorientation followed her constantly, appearing in the pauses between tasks and the stillness of late evenings. She did not allow herself dramatic displays of grief. Instead, she carried the ache quietly, believing that acceptance required endurance rather than confrontation. When her body began to feel different, she dismissed it at first as stress. Fatigue came easily, appetite shifted unpredictably, and a lingering sense of unease settled beneath her focus. She attributed it to the emotional toll of separation, convincing herself that time and adjustment would restore balance. However, the persistence of the symptoms eventually led her to purchase a test, more out of practicality than expectation. She performed it without ceremony, standing alone in her bathroom under dim lighting, unprepared for the stillness that followed when the result appeared. The confirmation left her motionless, her thoughts scattering in directions she could not immediately organize. Pregnancy was not a possibility she had considered, and the weight of that reality settled heavily as understanding formed. She sat down slowly, holding the edge of the sink for stability, allowing herself to breathe before confronting what the result meant. It was not simply a personal shift, but the introduction of a life that would depend entirely on her choices and strength. Her first instinct was not panic but contemplation. She understood Daniel's perspective well enough to predict how he might react, recalling his emphasis on independence, order, and control. The idea of approaching him felt complicated, not because she feared rejection outright, but because she feared the nature of acceptance offered out of obligation. She believed a child deserved presence rooted in willingness, not responsibility imposed by circumstance. This conviction shaped her decision before she had fully articulated it to herself. Doctor visits followed, each appointment transforming abstraction into tangible reality. Hearing the steady rhythm of a heartbeat through clinical equipment stirred something both fragile and profound within her. It reinforced the permanence of what lay ahead and awakened a protective instinct that grew stronger with each passing day. Financial concerns, physical adjustments, and emotional uncertainty became daily considerations, yet beneath them ran a steady current of determination. She began restructuring her life, preparing quietly for changes she knew would demand resilience. There were moments of doubt, particularly during solitary nights when exhaustion softened her resolve. She questioned whether withholding the truth from Daniel was fairness or fear, weighing potential outcomes without reaching simple conclusions. Still, she returned to the belief that her responsibility centered on stability rather than shared history. Each time she imagined explaining the situation, she pictured conversations shaped by calculation rather than care, and that image strengthened her commitment to independence. As her pregnancy progressed, the world around her seemed to shift in subtle ways. Ordinary experiences took on deeper significance, from the careful selection of food to the deliberate planning of finances and living arrangements. Friends noticed changes in her priorities, though she disclosed only what she felt necessary, guarding her personal journey with quiet discretion. She cultivated patience within herself, embracing adaptation as part of growth rather than compromise. By the time her condition became undeniable, Mia no longer viewed the path ahead with uncertainty alone. Fear remained present, but it existed alongside purpose and acceptance. She understood that her life had entered a chapter defined by responsibility, yet she also sensed possibility in the transformation. The future she once imagined with Daniel had dissolved, but a different future had begun to form, one shaped by her choices, her courage, and a bond that would redefine her understanding of love and commitment in ways she had never anticipated. The months that followed transformed Mia's life in ways she could never have prepared for, unfolding gradually yet relentlessly, shaping both her body and her understanding of herself. Pregnancy demanded patience she had never been forced to practice before, and each day carried its own physical and emotional adjustments. What once felt familiar became uncertain, from the rhythm of her work to the simple act of resting without discomfort. Yet she approached these changes with quiet determination, treating each challenge not as an obstacle but as a responsibility she had chosen to accept. Medical appointments became milestones marking the passage of time. Sitting in waiting rooms surrounded by strangers whose lives intersected briefly with hers, she often reflected on how dramatically her future had shifted. Hearing updates from doctors, seeing images that translated possibility into reality, and feeling the steady growth of life within her deepened her resolve. There were moments when fears surfaced unexpectedly, particularly when contemplating the magnitude of raising a child alone, but those moments never lingered long enough to overshadow her commitment. Financial planning demanded practical focus, and Mia approached it with methodical care. She reassessed her career priorities, sought additional opportunities where possible, and restructured her spending with foresight. Though the pressure was considerable, she refused to let anxiety dictate her outlook. She surrounded herself with supportive routines, maintaining discipline not as a shield against uncertainty but as a foundation for stability. Each decision reinforced her belief that preparation was an act of protection rather than sacrifice. As her pregnancy progressed, physical sensations strengthened her emotional connection to the life she carried. The first unmistakable movements were both startling and profound, transforming abstract awareness into intimate familiarity. She found herself speaking softly when alone, expressing reassurance in words meant as much for herself as for the child. These private conversations fostered a bond that alleviated loneliness and replaced lingering sorrow with anticipation. Instead of viewing her circumstances through the lens of what she had lost, she began to see them as the beginning of something deeply meaningful. The day her daughter was born arrived with intensity that eclipsed anything she had previously experienced. The hospital environment, filled with urgency and professional calm, framed the event with clarity and focus. Pain and exhaustion blended into a singular effort directed toward bringing new life into the world, and in those hours she discovered reserves of strength she had not known she possessed. When the cries of the newborn finally filled the room, the emotional impact surpassed expectation, grounding her in a moment that felt both surreal and definitive. Holding the child for the first time reshaped her perspective completely. The baby's blonde hair and vivid blue eyes immediately revealed a resemblance Mia could not ignore, yet the recognition did not provoke regret. Instead, it deepened her sense of responsibility, reminding her of the connection between past choices and present reality. She named the girl Lily, choosing a name that symbolized renewal and gentleness, qualities she hoped would define her daughter's future. Life after returning home unfolded through sleepless nights, quiet routines, and constant adjustment. Caring for an infant demanded patience, attention, and adaptability, yet it also brought unexpected fulfillment. The small gestures, a steady grip around her finger, the first responsive smile, the calm of shared silence, carried significance that outweighed fatigue. Mia discovered resilience within herself, navigating challenges not with perfection but with sincerity and persistence. As Lily grew, her presence filled spaces that once echoed with absence. The apartment no longer felt empty, it carried warmth shaped by laughter and movement. Mia's understanding of love evolved beyond romantic expectation, centering instead on devotion without condition. She recognized that her journey had not been defined by abandonment or hardship alone, but by the capacity to create stability, nurture growth, and embrace transformation. Though Daniel remained absent from their lives, the shadow of that connection no longer dictated her outlook. She focused on the present, cultivating an environment where Lily could thrive without inheriting unresolved bitterness. In doing so, Mia discovered a deeper sense of self than she had ever experienced before, grounded not in circumstance but in intention. Her story had diverged from the past she once imagined, yet it led her toward a future defined by resilience, purpose, and a bond that would continue shaping both their lives in the years ahead. Time continued its steady progression, and in Daniel Hartley's world the passage of months was measured less by personal reflection and more by achievement. His company expanded into new markets, investor confidence strengthened, and recognition from industry leaders solidified his reputation as someone capable of turning vision into measurable results. The routines he relied upon became more refined, his schedule increasingly precise, and the expectations placed upon him grew correspondingly. Public perception portrayed him as composed and unwavering, a leader whose clarity of purpose allowed little room for distraction. His professional environment rewarded detachment. Meetings filled with strategic negotiation, presentations outlining ambitious expansion, and decisions affecting hundreds of employees required composure rather than introspection. Daniel cultivated that composure deliberately, reinforcing the belief that emotional restraint ensured effectiveness. While colleagues admired his focus, few recognized that such discipline also created distance. He maintained cordial interactions and occasional social engagements, yet rarely permitted anyone to cross the boundary separating professional connection from genuine familiarity. Outside the office, his personal life reflected similar patterns. Invitations to events and introductions to potential partners occurred regularly, often arranged through networks that valued compatibility of status more than emotional resonance. He participated with polite attentiveness, engaging in conversations and shared outings that rarely extended beyond surface-level connection. Relationships formed briefly and ended without conflict, leaving little impact beyond confirmation that something essential remained absent. Rather than confronting that absence directly, Daniel categorized it as preference, attributing his detachment to ambition rather than unresolved experience. Nevertheless, memories surfaced unpredictably. Certain music, familiar gestures, or quiet pauses after long workdays occasionally reminded him of earlier companionship. He did not dwell on such recollections, yet neither could he fully prevent them. The thought of Mia appeared not as longing but as curiosity, accompanied by a recognition that he had chosen a path defined by independence. He reassured himself that prioritizing stability and focus had been necessary, framing past decisions as rational adjustments rather than emotional avoidance. As years progressed, success accumulated tangible markers. He purchased property reflecting his achievements, expanded philanthropic initiatives intended to support educational programs, and increased visibility within professional circles. These accomplishments provided satisfaction, though not fulfillment in the way he occasionally imagined it might feel. Even celebrations marking significant milestones concluded with quiet returns to solitude, the applause and admiration fading into familiar silence. Daniel began to notice subtle changes within himself, moments when professional victories seemed less complete than anticipated. The absence of someone with whom to share them introduced a nuance he had not previously acknowledged. While he did not interpret this awareness as regret, it prompted reflection on the nature of connection and purpose. He observed peers whose families accompanied their success, noting interactions shaped by affection rather than expectation, and found himself considering dimensions of life he had deliberately neglected. Despite these contemplations, he remained confident in his trajectory. He continued to expand the company's influence, guided initiatives designed to secure long-term sustainability, and cultivated a leadership style that emphasized both innovation and stability. Yet beneath this forward momentum lay an undefined sense of incompletion, subtle enough to ignore yet persistent enough to revisit. He could not articulate precisely what was missing, only that his carefully constructed world lacked an element he could neither quantify nor control. What Daniel did not realize was that beyond his sphere of awareness, a life existed shaped by choices he had long since compartmentalized. While he interpreted his journey as self-contained, its implications extended further than he understood. The distance between past and present seemed secure, yet it rested on circumstances destined to shift unexpectedly. The completeness he pursued through ambition would soon encounter a reality capable of redefining his understanding of responsibility, connection, and consequence in ways no strategic foresight could anticipate. Rain had settled over the city that afternoon, soft but persistent, blurring the sharp lines of buildings and muting the usual rush of movement along the streets. Daniel entered the cafe seeking nothing more than a brief escape between meetings, drawn by the promise of quiet and familiar routine. It was a modest place compared to the venues he usually frequented, but its understated calm offered a welcome contrast to the intensity of his day. The scent of fresh coffee and the gentle hum of conversation created an atmosphere that encouraged pause rather than urgency. He approached the counter with little awareness of his surroundings, mentally reviewing pending decisions and obligations. Only after ordering did he allow himself a moment to observe the room. His gaze moved casually across occupied tables, registering details without particular focus, until it stopped abruptly on a figure seated near the window. Recognition came gradually rather than instantly, as memory aligned with the present, and the passage of time reshaped familiarity into something almost unrecognizable. Mia sat there, composed and self-assured, her brown hair loosely framing her face, her posture reflecting quiet confidence. Before he could process the encounter fully, another detail commanded his attention. Seated beside her was a small child, no older than 2, absorbed in an improvised game involving a spoon and the surface of the table. The girl's laughter rose lightly above the subdued background noise, her movements animated and uninhibited. Daniel's initial reaction was curiosity rather than comprehension, yet something about her presence drew his focus more intensely than he expected. When she lifted her head, her blue eyes caught the light, and the resemblance struck him with unmistakable force. He felt an unfamiliar stillness settle within him, as though the environment had receded and left him alone with an understanding he had not yet accepted. The child's blonde hair and striking features mirrored aspects of himself with unsettling clarity, and the realization formed before he consciously articulated it. Logic resisted the implication, yet instinct recognized it immediately, compelling him to approach despite the uncertainty pressing against him. Mia noticed him as he stepped closer, her expression shifting from surprise to measured calm. The years between them were evident not only in appearance but in demeanor, each shaped by experiences neither fully understood. There was no visible resentment in her gaze, yet neither was there nostalgia. Instead, she met him with composed acknowledgement. The child, unaware of the significance surrounding the encounter, observed him with open curiosity, her attention briefly diverted from her play. Their conversation began cautiously, words chosen with awareness of the unexpected nature of their reunion. Daniel asked simple questions first, seeking orientation within the moment rather than direct confrontation. Mia responded with clarity, her tone steady and without hesitation, as though she had long prepared for this possibility. When she confirmed what his intuition had already suggested, the weight of her statement altered the atmosphere entirely. The child was his daughter. The declaration did not provoke immediate reaction. Daniel absorbed it gradually, his thoughts moving through disbelief, analysis, and realization. He studied the child again, recognizing gestures and expressions that felt undeniably familiar, and the truth became impossible to dismiss. The passage of 2 years condensed into a single moment, confronting him with the awareness that life had unfolded beyond his knowledge, shaped by decisions he had considered final. Mia did not accuse or dramatize, presenting the reality with composed honesty. She explained her reasoning without seeking justification, describing circumstances that had guided her choice to proceed independently. Her perspective carried neither bitterness nor apology, only acknowledgement of what had been necessary at the time. Daniel listened, understanding that any response he offered could not alter the past nor recover the years already gone. As the rain continued outside, the quiet interior of the cafe framed an encounter neither had anticipated yet both would carry forward. For Daniel, the discovery unsettled assumptions he had maintained for years, introducing responsibility not as abstract concept but as tangible presence seated before him. For Mia, the meeting marked a transition from secrecy to openness, allowing reality to exist without concealment. Between them sat Lily, her innocence untouched by complexity, embodying a connection that would now redefine the course of their lives in ways either could yet fully comprehend. The moments following Mia's quiet confirmation lingered with an intensity neither of them attempted to interrupt. Daniel remained seated across from her, the steady rhythm of rainfall against the cafe windows blending into the background as his thoughts struggled to reorder themselves. He had spent years developing the ability to respond decisively under pressure, yet this situation resisted strategy or immediate interpretation. The presence of the child between them transformed abstraction into undeniable reality, confronting him with a dimension of consequence he had never contemplated in practical terms. He studied Lily more carefully, not in an intrusive way, but with the tentative attention of someone trying to understand an entirely new language. Her features were unmistakably delicate, her movements expressive and spontaneous, and her curiosity remained undisturbed by the weight of adult conversation unfolding around her. When she met his gaze again, her expression conveyed simple interest rather than recognition, and the innocence of that reaction unsettled him deeply. He realized that to her he was merely another stranger, a realization that carried more impact than accusation ever could have. Daniel's questions emerged slowly, each shaped by uncertainty rather than defensiveness. He asked when Nia had learned of the pregnancy, how she had managed alone, and what had influenced her decision not to contact him. His tone avoided confrontation, though he could not entirely suppress the undercurrent of disbelief. Mia answered patiently, recounting her experiences with clarity that reflected long contemplation. She described the practical challenges, the adjustments she had embraced, and the reasoning behind prioritizing stability for the child over the possibility of reluctant involvement. Her explanation did not seek validation, it presented perspective shaped by necessity and conviction. Listening required Daniel to confront a perspective unfamiliar to him, one defined by emotional responsibility rather than calculated planning. He recognized the strength underlying Nia's composure, understanding that independence had not been effortless but constructed through endurance. He also acknowledged the limitations of his own past assumptions, realizing that his departure had carried implications extending beyond his awareness. This recognition did not provoke resentment, but a gradual sense of accountability, forming with increasing clarity as their conversation continued. Lily's presence subtly altered the dynamic, introducing moments of levity that contrasted with the gravity of discussion. She occasionally interrupted with observations or questions unrelated to the adult's concerns, drawing attention to her world of immediate curiosity. Daniel found himself responding instinctively, offering brief answers and encouragement, surprised by the ease with which these interactions unfolded. Each exchange, though simple, reinforced the tangible connection between them, reshaping his understanding of involvement from theoretical to personal. As the conversation progressed, Daniel became acutely aware of time lost. He contemplated milestones he had not witnessed, memories formed without his participation, and experiences shaping Lily's identity beyond his influence. The realization carried neither dramatic regret nor self-reproach, but a quiet recognition of absence that could not be remedied retroactively. Instead of dwelling on irreversibility, he focused on what remained possible, considering how presence might be cultivated moving forward. Mia observed his responses attentively, evaluating sincerity through tone and consistency rather than declarations. She maintained emotional balance, neither encouraging nor discouraging further engagement, allowing Daniel space to navigate the discovery independently. Her restraint demonstrated confidence rooted in experience, indicating that her life no longer depended on his choices, yet remained open to constructive evolution. This equilibrium fostered a conversation grounded in respect rather than unresolved tension. By the time they prepared to leave, the atmosphere had shifted from shock toward contemplation. Practical matters arose naturally, including discussion of communication, gradual introduction, and prioritization of Lily's comfort. Daniel expressed willingness to proceed thoughtfully, acknowledging unfamiliarity without attempting to disguise it. Mia accepted this approach with measured agreement, emphasizing continuity and patience as guiding principles. Stepping outside into air refreshed by rain, Daniel experienced a perspective altered in ways he had not anticipated when entering the cafe. The city remained unchanged, yet his awareness of belonging within it had expanded. Responsibility no longer existed solely within corporate frameworks or strategic initiatives. It extended toward a relationship newly revealed and inherently meaningful. As he departed, accompanied by thoughts both unsettled and purposeful, he understood that discovery marked not conclusion but beginning, one that would require adaptation, humility, and sustained presence beyond anything he had previously encountered. The days following their unexpected meeting unfolded with a sense of cautious deliberation rather than urgency. Daniel approached the situation with an awareness that precision and patience mattered more than dramatic action. He arranged for the necessary legal and medical confirmations without imposing pressure, understanding that evidence would clarify reality but would not define relationships on its own. The process carried a clinical tone, yet beneath it lay a personal significance that altered his perception of every step. When the results confirmed what instinct had already recognized, the information did not shock him. Instead, it settled quietly, reinforcing responsibility with undeniable clarity. Sharing the confirmation with Mia did not provoke conflict or celebration. She received it calmly, her composure reflecting acceptance long established before documentation existed. For her, proof served merely as closure of uncertainty rather than revelation. What remained unresolved involved the manner in which Daniel would integrate himself into Lily's life, and she made it clear that progression required consideration of the child's comfort above all else. Daniel agreed readily, recognizing that intention alone could not replace trust, and that consistency would determine credibility more effectively than words. Their initial arrangements were modest and carefully structured. Meetings occurred in familiar environments where Lily felt secure, allowing Daniel to engage without overwhelming her routine. He observed attentively, learning the subtleties of her personality and habits, noting the enthusiasm with which she explored surroundings and the gentle reassurance she sought from Mia when uncertain. Rather than attempting to accelerate familiarity, he chose to participate gradually, offering presence through attentive listening and simple interaction. Conversation with Lily revealed an aspect of communication Daniel had never practiced in professional contexts. Her questions were direct, guided by curiosity rather than agenda, and her responses reflected immediate emotional truth. He found himself adapting language and tone, explaining concepts with clarity and warmth, discovering satisfaction in exchanges free from negotiation or strategy. These interactions fostered an emerging connection grounded not in obligation but in genuine interest, encouraging him to view involvement as privilege rather than task. Outside these visits, Daniel reevaluated elements of his own life, recognizing adjustments necessary to accommodate new priorities. He delegated responsibilities within the company more strategically, creating space within his schedule previously occupied entirely by professional commitments. Colleagues observed the shift with interest, interpreting it as expansion of perspective rather than withdrawal from ambition. Daniel did not elaborate on personal motivations, preferring actions to articulate transformation without explanation. Mia remained observant throughout this period, attentive to both overt behavior and subtle consistency. She appreciated Daniel's restraint, particularly his avoidance of exaggerated gestures intended to compensate for absence. Instead, his reliability in maintaining agreed schedules and respecting boundaries indicated understanding of the process required. She permitted gradual extension of trust, allowing longer interactions and introducing shared activities that encouraged familiarity. Her confidence rested not on expectation but on measured evaluation of ongoing commitment. As weeks progressed, Lily's comfort around Daniel increased naturally. She began anticipating his visits, sharing observations and achievements with enthusiasm, and including him in imaginative games reflective of her growing confidence. Daniel experienced these moments with quiet appreciation, recognizing the significance of acceptance earned through authenticity. He became attentive to details shaping her world, from favorite stories to preferred routines, embracing participation as opportunity rather than obligation. Reflection accompanied these developments, prompting Daniel to consider how differently his life now unfolded compared to previous assumptions. The pursuit of accomplishment remained central, yet it no longer existed as sole measure of fulfillment. Engagement with Lily introduced dimensions shaped by connection rather than outcome, encouraging contemplation of purpose beyond productivity. This shift did not diminish ambition, instead, it refined perspective, aligning achievement with broader understanding of value. By the conclusion of this stage, relationship among them had progressed from revelation toward foundation. While certainty about future remained evolving, the trajectory established itself through mutual respect and shared intention. Daniel's role continued forming through action, Mia's trust expanded through observation, and Lily's world widened through inclusion. What had begun as unexpected encounter developed into structured possibility, demonstrating that adaptation guided by sincerity could transform circumstance into meaningful continuity. The progress they had built did not dissolve suddenly, but it was tested in a way none of them had anticipated. Life had settled into a rhythm defined by predictability and gentle adjustment, and Daniel had grown accustomed to the presence of Lily and Mia as a natural extension of his daily priorities. It was during one of these ordinary days that the unexpected disruption occurred, arriving without warning and reshaping the balance they had achieved. Lily's illness began subtly, manifesting as fatigue and discomfort that seemed typical of childhood ailments. Mia responded attentively, monitoring symptoms with care, initially confident that rest and routine would restore her daughter's energy. Yet when the condition intensified, her concern deepened into urgency. Medical consultation followed, bringing with it the sterile calm of hospital environments that contrasted sharply with the emotional gravity she felt. Daniel arrived soon after being informed, his demeanor composed but marked by unmistakable tension. The diagnosis required immediate intervention, presenting both complexity and risk. While the physicians communicated assurance grounded in experience, the seriousness of the procedure left no room for casual reassurance. Daniel listened closely, absorbing technical explanations and logistical considerations with his usual analytical focus. He arranged resources without hesitation, ensuring every aspect of treatment proceeded efficiently, yet beneath that efficiency lay unfamiliar vulnerability. For the first time, he confronted a situation where control extended only so far, where outcome depended not on strategy but on circumstance. Waiting during the operation revealed dimensions of patience and reflection Daniel had rarely experienced. Hours unfolded slowly within the hospital corridor, time measured not by productivity but by anticipation. Mia remained nearby, outwardly composed yet inwardly navigating waves of apprehension. Their interaction during this period transcended previous caution, grounded in shared concern rather than structured communication. They spoke occasionally, offering reassurance and quiet understanding, recognizing mutual investment in Lily's well-being. Daniel found himself confronting emotions he had long compartmentalized. Fear emerged not as dramatic panic but as sustained unease, shaped by awareness of potential loss and the realization of how deeply he valued Lily's presence. He acknowledged internally that attachment, once perceived as liability, now represented significance beyond professional accomplishment. This recognition carried weight, reshaping his interpretation of connection and prompting reflection on choices that had defined his earlier detachment. When the procedure concluded successfully, relief manifested gradually rather than explosively. The confirmation of Lily's stability allowed tension to dissipate, replaced by gratitude expressed through quiet gestures rather than overt celebration. Daniel visited her bedside, observing her recovery with attentiveness that reflected genuine care. Lily responded with familiar warmth, her resilience evident even in vulnerability, and her comfort in his presence reinforced the authenticity of their bond. The experience influenced their relationship collectively. Mia observed Daniel's steadfast involvement, recognizing consistency that extended beyond convenience or obligation. His willingness to remain present throughout uncertainty demonstrated depth of commitment not easily dismissed. Trust strengthened subtly, built not on declarations but on participation during adversity. Lily's recovery further united them, fostering appreciation for stability achieved through cooperation and mutual concern. In the aftermath, Daniel carried forward insight gained through the ordeal. He reevaluated priorities with renewed clarity, understanding that responsibility encompassed emotional engagement as well as practical provision. Professional ambitions continued to guide him, yet they now coexisted with a broader perspective on fulfillment. He acknowledged that connection enriched achievement rather than diminishing it, integrating this awareness into daily choices. Thus, what began as crisis evolved into transformation. The illness tested resilience, revealing strengths within each of them that might otherwise have remained unrecognized. Their shared experience reinforced interdependence and highlighted the significance of presence during vulnerability. Moving beyond the hospital walls, they carried forward not only relief but a deeper understanding of what it meant to care, to commit, and to remain connected regardless of uncertainty. Recovery unfolded gradually, bringing with it a renewed sense of steadiness that none of them took for granted. After leaving the hospital behind, Lily returned to her routines with a resilience that impressed both Mia and Daniel, and her laughter once again filled their shared spaces with lightness. Yet beneath that familiar joy lay a quiet shift in their relationships, shaped by what they had endured together. The experience had forged an unspoken understanding, encouraging closeness built not from obligation but from shared responsibility and trust. Daniel's involvement in Lily's life expanded naturally rather than through deliberate declaration. He remained attentive to her needs, participating in daily moments that might have once seemed insignificant to him, but now carried genuine meaning. He accompanied her on outings, assisted with early learning activities, and listened patiently to stories delivered with unfiltered enthusiasm. Each interaction deepened familiarity, allowing comfort to replace the tentative distance that had defined their earliest meetings. Through consistency rather than spectacle, he established presence as something dependable and reassuring. Lily responded to this reliability with openness characteristic of childhood sincerity. Her attachment developed without hesitation, expressed through casual affection and spontaneous confidence. She began referring to him with growing ease, and eventually the title she chose reflected recognition rather than suggestion. The first time she addressed him as her father occurred without ceremony, woven into conversation as naturally as any other word. Daniel did not react outwardly with dramatic emotion, yet the significance resonated internally with profound clarity. He understood that acceptance of this nature could not be requested or orchestrated, it had to emerge through trust. Mia observed these developments with thoughtful awareness, balancing appreciation with careful evaluation. Her priority remained Lily's emotional stability, and she ensured that progression remained gradual and authentic. Over time, Daniel's actions demonstrated continuity beyond temporary enthusiasm, allowing Mia's guarded perspective to soften. Conversations between them grew more collaborative, reflecting shared intention rather than cautious negotiation. They discussed practical matters concerning Lily's future, aligning approaches toward education, well-being, and opportunity. Beyond structured discussion, moments of genuine companionship began to surface between Mia and Daniel themselves. Shared experiences related to Lily fostered mutual respect, revealing dimensions of personality that had evolved since their separation. Daniel displayed attentiveness shaped by reflection, while Mia exhibited openness grounded in confidence rather than dependency. Their interactions were neither nostalgic nor strained. Instead, they reflected maturity born from individual growth and collective circumstance. Daniel also encountered internal transformation as he adapted to the evolving role he inhabited. He recognized satisfaction derived from engagement beyond professional success, finding fulfillment in participation within Lily's world and cooperation with Mia. Rather than perceiving these elements as competing with ambition, he understood them as complementary, enriching perspective and purpose. This realization altered his approach to leadership and decision-making, encouraging balance previously absent from his priorities. Occasionally he reflected upon the time he had not shared with them, acknowledging absence without allowing it to overshadow present involvement. He accepted that the past could not be altered, yet he embraced the opportunity to contribute meaningfully to what lay ahead. This acceptance cultivated humility and reinforced dedication, guiding his actions with sincerity rather than compensation. As their connection strengthened, the atmosphere among them shifted toward genuine unity. Lily thrived within the environment shaped by cooperative care, while Mia and Daniel navigated their evolving relationship with thoughtful consideration. What had begun as unexpected revelation matured into functional partnerships centered on mutual respect and affection for the child who connected them. Thus the period marked not conclusion but consolidation, reinforcing bonds developed through patience and understanding. Their lives intertwined through shared experiences, demonstrating that relationships shaped by growth and authenticity could transform uncertainty into stability. In the continuity of everyday moments, they discovered that belonging was defined not by origin alone but by consistent presence, empathy, and willingness to move forward together. Time brought them to a point where uncertainty no longer defined their connection, yet something remained unspoken between Mia and Daniel. Their shared responsibilities and mutual respect had created stability, but deeper emotional resolution required acknowledgement rather than assumption. It was Daniel who eventually initiated a conversation intended not to revisit the past with regret, but to consider the possibility of a future shaped by understanding. He chose the setting carefully, inviting Mia to meet at the same cafe where their unexpected reunion had first reshaped their lives. The familiarity of the environment carried symbolic weight, though he avoided dramatizing the gesture. When she arrived, the exchange began with ease, grounded in the comfort they had developed through collaboration and shared experience. Their dialogue unfolded gradually, transitioning from practical topics toward reflection, allowing honesty to emerge naturally rather than through confrontation. Daniel expressed his perspective with measured sincerity, acknowledging the distance and misjudgment that had once characterized his decisions. He spoke not in pursuit of absolution but in recognition of growth, explaining how involvement in Lily's life had altered his understanding of responsibility and connection. He admitted that the years had revealed limitations within his earlier outlook, demonstrating that independence without empathy offered only partial fulfillment. His words conveyed clarity and humility, shaped by reflection rather than persuasion. Mia listened attentively, evaluating not only his statements but the consistency of behavior she had observed over time. She responded with equal candor, describing the challenges she had faced and the strength required to establish stability for herself and Lily. She emphasized that her acceptance of his presence stemmed from observation of sincerity rather than sentimentality, and she clarified that trust, once rebuilt, required continued authenticity. Her perspective remained grounded, neither dismissing possibility nor surrendering caution. Their conversation evolved toward mutual recognition of how both had changed. They acknowledged that the individuals they had been years earlier no longer existed in the same form, and that their current connection rested on experiences shaping maturity and insight. Rather than attempting to restore what once existed, they contemplated building something new, defined by shared values and mutual respect. This approach allowed them to consider partnership not as repetition but as progression. Daniel presented his intention without theatrical gesture, explaining that he wished to explore a deeper relationship founded on cooperation, affection, and honesty. He clarified that his proposal carried no expectation beyond openness to possibility, emphasizing willingness to proceed at a pace comfortable for both of them. Mia considered his words thoughtfully, recognizing that emotional healing and trust were processes rather than instantaneous decisions. Her response reflected measured optimism, accepting the opportunity to explore connection while maintaining awareness of growth's ongoing nature. Their agreement did not transform circumstances overnight, yet it established direction characterized by clarity and intention. They approached subsequent interactions with renewed openness, integrating affection alongside partnership in ways both natural and considerate of Lily's well-being. This evolution enriched their dynamic, allowing shared experiences to extend beyond parental cooperation toward genuine companionship. In embracing this step forward, both Daniel and Mia demonstrated recognition that meaningful relationships arise not from erasing history but from learning through it. Their willingness to engage sincerely illustrated confidence shaped by resilience, affirming that connections strengthened by growth could transcend earlier limitations. The decision to move ahead together marked continuation rather than conclusion, reflecting a commitment to authenticity and the possibilities it made attainable. In the years that followed, their lives settled into a rhythm shaped by intention rather than uncertainty. What had once felt fragile grew steady through repetition of small, consistent choices, each reinforcing the bond they had agreed to nurture. Daniel and Mia did not attempt to rush their future or define it through grand declarations. Instead, they allowed it to evolve through shared responsibility, honest communication, and mutual respect. The foundation they built together extended beyond affection, grounded in trust earned through experience rather than assumption. Lily grew within this environment of stability and warmth, her early memories filled not with division, but with unity. She learned through observation how cooperation and care shape daily life, and her understanding of family formed naturally from the presence of both parents. Daniel became an integral part of her world, attending school events, guiding her curiosity, and encouraging her imagination. His engagement reflected authenticity rather than obligation, demonstrating commitment through time and attention. Mia witnessed these interactions with quiet satisfaction, recognizing that the balance she had once struggled to maintain alone now existed through partnership. Their relationship matured alongside their roles as parents, deepening through shared milestones and ordinary experiences alike. Conversations once centered solely on Lily gradually broadened, encompassing personal aspirations, reflections, and plans for the future. They navigated challenges together, approaching disagreement not as conflict but as opportunity for understanding. This evolution allowed affection to flourish in an environment shaped by openness, transforming companionship into genuine emotional connection. Eventually, their commitment culminated in a decision to formalize their partnership. The occasion reflected their shared values, intimate rather than elaborate, attended by those who mattered most. It symbolized continuity rather than spectacle, acknowledging the journey that had brought them together and the perspective they now carried forward. For Daniel, the moment represented more than personal fulfillment. It affirmed transformation shaped by responsibility and empathy. For Mia, it reflected recognition that resilience and trust could coexist, allowing her to embrace happiness without surrendering independence. Life continued beyond celebration, filled with the quiet complexities that accompany genuine connection. They remained attentive to Lily's development, encouraging her interests and guiding her growth with patience. Daniel balanced professional leadership with presence at home, demonstrating that ambition and care need not compete. Mia pursued her own aspirations while sustaining the equilibrium they had achieved together. Their shared efforts created a household defined by respect, laughter, and shared purpose. Looking back, either regarded the past with regret alone. They acknowledged mistakes and hardship as catalysts for growth, understanding that the path they traveled shaped the insight enabling their present happiness. Rather than idealizing struggle, they valued the perspective gained through confronting it, recognizing that maturity required both reflection and acceptance. Their story illustrated how transformation arises not from perfection but from willingness to adapt, to listen, and to remain present. In the fullness of time, what began as separation evolved into unity grounded in understanding. Their lives demonstrated that fulfillment emerges through sincerity and perseverance, that responsibility embraced wholeheartedly can reshape identity, and that love strengthened by growth becomes resilient. The future they shared did not erase their history, it incorporated it, forming a narrative defined by continuity, gratitude, and enduring connection. This story is not about wealth or status, but about choices and the consequences that rarely reveal themselves immediately. I wanted to portray imperfect people who make mistakes, grow, and learn to take responsibility for their decisions. At its core lies the idea that maturity comes not through success, but through the willingness to stay present, to care, and to change for the sake of others. The narrative explores human vulnerability, transformation, and the powerful bond between parent and child that can reshape even the strongest beliefs. Sometimes the right choices become clear only years later. Leaving is easy when life becomes difficult, but true strength lies in returning, accepting responsibility, and rebuilding the future. Love is not about perfect circumstances, but about choosing to stay despite fear and past mistakes.